Ladies and gentlemen, did you ask yourself, why are you here this evening? What do you want here? Did you ask yourself, how is your presence here this evening going to benefit or impact your family, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, and the community? A very good evening, South Africa and the international community, and I'm saying that deliberately, as I'm aware that this event is not only taking place here at the university, but it is also taking place on different social media platforms. Therefore, we are glad that the messages and the lecture that would be delivered here this evening would be received in the entire country, the continent, and the international community. Welcome to the 7th annual Chief Albert Luthuli lecture here at the University of South Africa. Can you please have your seats? So, I am a radio personality. I work for one of the biggest radio stations in the land that's broadcasting in Sesotho. And I am reminded that back then, during apartheid, you would never have a radio station broadcast in your home language. So we are grateful to people like Ntate Albert Luthuli for fighting for our freedom, for our education, development, and recognition of African languages. Ladies and gentlemen, you look amazing this evening. You're looking well prepared for the lecture, well prepared for the conversation that we will have this evening about African languages. And that is a discussion or a topic very close to my heart. And you will have the opportunity to cast your views, to ask questions about the subject later during the event. So you would remember that in South Africa we have 12 official languages, including sign language, which was officially signed into law on the 19th of July 2023 by President Cyril Ramaphosa. And I must indicate that I was super excited when that happened, because I have a special heart in my I have a special place in my heart for people with disabilities. So fela ke tla be ke fositse hankekeng ka di arola puo tsena tsa ka lapeng tse 12 hore o di utlwe hantle tse teng mona lapeng Afrika Borwa. Re na le puo ya Sesotho, Basotho ba heso dumelang. Re na le puo ya Setswana, Batswana ba heso dumelang. Re na le puo ya Sepedi, Bapedi ba heso thobela. Re na le puo ya isiZulu, Mazulu a heso sanibonani. Re na le puo ya isiXhosa, Maxhosa a heso molweni. Re na le puo ya English, our English speakers. Afrikaans, en nou ons Afrikaans sprekende mense goeienaand. Re na le puo ya Setsonga, Matsonga a heso liperile. Re na le puo ya Seswati, Maswati a heso lishonile. Re na le puo ya Tshivenda, Mavenda a heso matekwane ya buti. Re na le puo ya isiNdebele, Ndebele a heso lotshani. Ebe bana ba borona ba buang puo ya matsoho sign language. Let me welcome the presence of our important guests this evening, starting with the Premier of Gauteng, Ntate Panyaza Lesufi, our keynote speaker, South African Ambassador to Namibia, Thenjiwe Mtintso, who will deliver the 7th Annual Chief Albert Luthuli Lecture 2025. We have the Acting Vice Chancellor of Unisa. We have Professor Pulen Sekhalo. She is Chief Albert Luthuli Research Chair. All protocols observed. Let me also acknowledge everyone here tonight. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. But before we can welcome our speakers to the podium to share their addresses, I would like for us to all watch this Unisa corporate video.
Whatever the setbacks of the moment, nothing can stop us now. Whatever the difficulties, Africa shall be at peace. However improbable it may sound to the skeptics, Africa will prosper. Whatever the setbacks of the moment, nothing can stop us now. Whatever the difficulties, Africa shall be at peace. However improbable it may sound to the skeptics, Africa will prosper.
More than anything, Unisa must be celebrated as a pioneer of the distance education model, an enduring gift not only to South Africa, the continent, but to the human civilization in the knowledge arena the world over.
Education is the light in a dark room. It's the spark of a dream, a passport to the future, and the seed of generational change. Through education, we reflect on yesterday and define tomorrow. Rooted in South Africa and the African continent, Unisa can truly claim to be the African university in the service of humanity. Unisa stands at the pinnacle of education through open distance e-learning, with a footprint of students in more than 100 countries worldwide. Since the founding of the university in 1873 as an examining body, we have been a trailblazer. Unisa is the first and only institution in South Africa to carry our country's name with pride, and the first public university in the world to exclusively teach by means of distance education, an ever-changing dynamic university with a global reach. Unisa's history spans the entire modern history of South Africa, opening up a world of academic study opportunities for former activists and struggle heroes, thought leaders, business people, legal experts, acclaimed entertainers, and sports stars. The university takes pride in almost 1 million alumni, with 10 alumni chapters internationally, making their mark in diverse fields and capabilities. Some of the noteworthy alumni include President Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki, who is also the Chancellor and custodian of the university's Calabash Awards, current President Cyril Ramaphosa, former South African Reserve Bank Governor Joe Marcus, and current one, Lesetja Kganyago, internationally Reserve Bank governors of Eswatini and Namibia, to name but a few. At Unisa, the World Wide Web is our educational playground, but we also have beautiful and impressive campuses. Unisa's Makelneuk campus is located in the city of Tshwane and is a major landmark of the capital city. The Florida campus in Johannesburg is Unisa's science campus, housing state-of-the-art infrastructure and laboratory equipment. Unisa has 6 regional hubs including Ethiopia and multiple centers across the country. We have embraced the fact that we need to adapt quickly to the fast-paced higher education environment of the 21st century, and this did in our management style and leadership practice. In articulating her vision, the new Principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of South Africa, the first woman to be appointed at the helm of Unisa, Professor Buleng Linkabola, shared that Unisa is well placed to address society's most demanding challenges by using research to meaningfully transform the lives of those in our communities. To this end, Unisa is working on the following catalytic niche areas. Marine studies. As a discipline, marine studies covers field-specific studies like marine ecology and biology to policy-related studies like marine spatial planning and coastal economies. Many other areas of marine research and studies are covered in this niche area. Aviation and aeronautical studies. Aviation and aeronautical studies covers specializations in areas as diverse as aeronautical engineering and aerospace safety, and South Africa's 18 airports forms a major role player for passengers and goods transitioning to and from our country. This is a niche that supports a major component of the country's economy. Automotive studies. The South African automotive industry is projected to grow from 600,000 to 1.4 million vehicles a year in production. There is major potential to be explored in Unisa's commitment to automotive studies. In 2022, students from the Department of Mechanical Engineering participated in the Sasol Solar Challenge with their solar-powered car that travels from Johannesburg to Cape Town without using a single drop of fuel. Energy studies. Unisa's Institute for Development of Energy for African Sustainability specializes.
Round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, let's officially begin our program. I am going to call onto the stage the Acting Vice Chancellor here at Unisa, Professor Mpho Ngwebe, to give us a welcome address. Can we please show Prof. Ngwebe some appreciation, ladies and gentlemen?
Program Director, Thenjiwe Mtintso, I thought as we are enjoying the fruits of the 4th Industrial Revolution, I would deliver the welcome address using my cell phone. So the battery is flat now. And now my problems are bigger than those of Kaizer Chiefs and Eskom combined. It is double trouble. Madam Program Director, I have been given the table of presidents, and of course it is a long list. It reminds me of my previous life as a clergyman. I was to accompany this clergyman to the correctional facility to pray for the inmates so that they are rehabilitated. Like me tonight, the clergyman did not prepare anything, any scripture. So he just thought, because he knows the Bible very well, he would be able to open any scripture and he would be able to interpret it and give the sermon. Guess what? He opened Matthew 1, verse 1 to 17. The 3 pages of the genealogy of Jesus Christ. As he reads, it keeps on saying, Hezekiah, the father of Manasseh, Manasseh, the father of Ammon, Ammon, the father of Josiah, and Josiah, the father of Jeconiah, and his brothers at the time of Babylon. So he couldn't interpret it, and he was defeated. What he just said was, hey, these people are just giving birth to each other. Program director, let me recognize the presence of the Registrar of the University of South Africa, Professor Moloko Seputa, the Vice Principal Institutional Development, Professor Ramakhwai Maganu, and members of the Executive and Extended Management present here tonight. Our esteemed guest speaker for tonight, Ambassador Thenjiwe Mtintso, South African anti-apartheid activist. Let us give her a round of applause. Premier Panyasali Sufi, the Premier of Gauteng. Let us give him a round of applause as well. Honorable Malisatsi Peti Mahalelo, Acting Deputy Judge President, Ambassador Mr. Salih Omar Abdu, Ambassador of the State of Eritrea and the Dean of Diplomatic Corps, Embassy of the State of Eritrea, and other ambassadors and high commissioners representing various countries in South Africa. Queen R. Shuping, Queen of Halagadi San, Northern Sun Kingdom, Honorable Muziwengosi Blessed Kwala, National Chairperson and Chief Whip in the KZN Legislature, Advocate Charlie Naidu, the Chairperson of the Luthuli Museum Council, and other members of the Luthuli Museum present here this evening. Professor Pulen Seralo, Chairperson of Unisa, Chief Albert Luthuli Research Chair, and Mr. Sandile Luthuli and other members of the Chief Albert Luthuli family present here this evening. Dignitaries from the national, provincial, and local government, and friends of the University of South Africa present, and dignitaries that are attending virtually. Our panel of discussants here tonight, Professor Daniel Machila from Unisa and Ms. Kumo Feni from Northwest University. Our sign language interpreters, we have Tuli Zigalala and Nonhlanhla Ndaba. Seasoned Friends Entertainment, representative from higher learning institutions, religious communities and traditional leaders and international communities members present, members of the Unisa National Student Representative Council and other student bodies, alumni and other members of the university community present, and the various labor forum and Unisa forum, representatives from media houses, distinguished guests, members of the audience, colleagues and cousins, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. That was better than the Bible verse I told you about. But just read it when you get home, that Bible verse, and augment it with Psalm 151. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been requested, or rather instructed, to deliver the opening and welcome address on behalf of the Vice-Chancellor of the University of South Africa, the University of the Land, Professor Pulen Lenkabula. She's currently attending other commitments in New Zealand, and as I said, the key word is on behalf. You must underline that. And I've also been instructed on what to say. As instructed, I will not add or reduce the opening address message. I'm afraid of the plaque that are recorded in the book of Revelation. For those who add or subtract, they are in great trouble. In the absence of amen, my disclaimer is that if at the end of the welcome address you don't feel inspired, but rather expired, don't shoot the messenger. I don't know what it means. However, if you feel inspired, please applaud the messenger. You all know that our Vice-Chancellor is a great orator, and I am not going to be able to fill her shoes. Ladies and gentlemen, I am both humbled and elevated by this honor and privilege to deliver this welcome address on behalf of the Vice-Chancellor. And this year's lecture is on reclaiming African indigenous languages. It is an honor to stand before you today as we reflect on one of the most profound yet often neglected dimension of Africa's decolonial journey. The question of African indigenous languages, the breath of our people, the mirror of their soul, and the vessel of their wisdom. Africa is home to more than 2,000 languages, an unparalleled linguistic richness that embodies diverse cultural narratives, philosophical depth, and indigenous knowledge system. I once eavesdropped on a conversation between a dean of education, I won't say which university, and a language practitioner. They were arguing about which is the mother of all profession between language studies and education, because the teachers are always claiming that education is the one, but it's the language because the child, the baby, must start by talking first or signing. In 2019, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution proclaiming the period of 2022 to 2032, the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, based on a recommendation by the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. We are already 4 years in the Decade of Indigenous Languages. I wonder what tangible deliverables we have achieved as the continent or as the country. From Cairo to Cape Town, from Lagos to Nairobi, our languages carry our histories, our humor, and our hope. They remind us that Africa speaks, not in one voice, but in a chorus of living languages that define who we are. The sign language interpreter next to me reminds us that sign language can be used when spoken word is physically impossible, such as talking underwater, talking through class, from a distance, at a loud music concert, and talking with your mouth full. Sign language can also let you talk to someone without interrupting others with noise. You can tell your friend how much you hate the movie while in the cinema without disturbing anyone. And I'm told that kids nowadays are learning sign language so that they can gossip about the teacher in the class. While we are facing extinction of languages such as Ngqu, with only 1, 2, or 3 fluent speakers, other languages are also mushrooming. Are they disrupting us? For example, here in the city of Tshwane, and I heard the program director talking about 12 official languages. Here in the city of Tshwane, Premier, we've got the 13th language. It's called isipitori. And it is necessary to learn this one to negotiate when you are at night. We all know that Pretoria is a country on its own. We have Mams, Sosha, Peli, and are also constituting a country within Pretoria with this language. Don't forget Hammanskraal. It is another country in 4 provinces, Mpumalanga, Gauteng, Northwest, and Limpopo. So Sipitori is an urban blend, a mixture of Sepedi, Setswana, Afrikaans, and English, making it a unique urban dialect that reflects Pretoria's multicultural vibe. And people from the coast, often when I engage them, like Professor Charlie here, he says he understands quickly when we speak in isipitori than when we speak in Sepedi or any other language. And it is an identity marker, that language. If you speak the language, instantly people can identify that you are from Pretoria or nearby township. It is a badge of pride. It is flexible in terms of grammar and closer to Tsotsital. It's an upgrade of Tsotsital, I think. And the Sipitori speakers, they switch between 4 languages in one sentence without even breathing. Olympic level code switching. Sipitori is the only language that connects people faster than actual Wi-Fi in the township. And the word of the day or the word of the night will be chovicho. It can mean cool. Yes, I agree. I am impressed or I'm just vibing. Context is everything when you speak. In English, we are saying, are you okay? And in Setswana, we say, upetse sentle. But in Sepitori, we say, smogo. When we congratulate, we say, congratulations. Re a o leboiša. And in Sepitori, we say, abashwe. English, we say, leave me alone. In Sepitori, we say, mfologe. And English, we say, how are you? And Sepitori, guess what? Otherwise, in English, we say, you tried your best. Here in Pretoria, we say, walwela. I am really not interested in that. In Sepitori, we say, mbore gape. They are jealous of me. Ke a ba futhumatsa. He is critical but stable. O šetše ka pae A1. So here is a question in English. So why did you break up? The English answer will be, we were just not meant for each other. Guess what in Sepitori? Are he na eng kae kae mafatsheng. If you learn this language, I tell you, you will thank me later. Because during the day, you will call them uncle. But at night, you will call them uncle. So you must learn that language. We have to read. The language is disrupting us. The key theme tonight is language, reclaiming our language. And this language is also disrupting us. Just like the disruptive technology is disrupting everything. So we have to reclaim African languages, and so that we reclaim the integrity of our being. It is to honor the wisdom of our oral tradition, the moral instruction embedded in our proverbs, and the philosophical worldview carried in our syntax. When children learn in their mother tongue, they don't only acquire literacy, they inherit a sense of worth and belonging. They come to know that their words are powerful, their stories are valid, and their culture a living source of pride. This reclamation nurtures confidence, cultural dignity, social cohesion, the very foundation of peaceful, self-defining communities. Language, then, is not a mere vehicle of communication. It is a vessel of identity. Just like I gave an example with Isipito, you can identify those people. A compass of belonging and an anchor of self-determination. As Ngugi wa Thiong'o reminds us in his book, Decolonizing the Mind of 1986, I quote, language carries culture and culture carries, particularly through orature and literature, the entire body of values by which we come to perceive ourselves and our place in the world. To recover our languages then is to recover the right to think and dream in our idioms, to restore the capacity to be the whole of our own voices. The most transformative potential of reclaiming African languages lies in reimagining education, research, so that we make these languages the language of teaching and learning and research. As the South African linguist Neville Alexander once wrote, the use of the mother tongue in education is not a sentimental issue. It is a matter of social justice. His words crystallize the moral agency of linguistic reform. Education language is not merely pedagogical inefficient. It is ethically exclusionary. We need to transform education by embedding African languages into the curriculum from primary school to the university. Not in where I come from, they say, Shipalambia, Lidua, Lesale, Mates. Elega Omalea Tlaba. I don't know what it means. But you should bend it while it is wet, because once it becomes dry, you bend it, it's going to break. So we are waiting for students to come to the university, and we say we are teaching them in indigenous languages. Already they can't read in indigenous languages, because we should start them when they are still young. As Ngugi wa Miri once said, a people without their language are a people without a soul. We cannot afford to lose our linguistic soul. It will be a linguicide. A linguicide is suicide of languages. Let us therefore commit to invest in our linguistic heritage and empower our educators and reimagine the education. And as I introduce the conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, Unisa, as the Africa's premier distance learning institution, serving students across the continent and beyond, bears a unique responsibility and opportunity to transform this issue. Without a student body reflecting the linguistic diversity of Southern Africa and beyond, Unisa is ideally positioned to pioneer multilingual education that honors this diversity rather than suppressing it. The University of South Africa has embarked on several projects for parity of esteem for all official languages, as well as promoting multilingualism to assist at elementary and tertiary level. And multilingualism is not only speaking different words for same thing in different languages, but it is venturing in another way to think about things. I have just paraphrased Flora Lewis, so that Turn It In does not deal with me. Perhaps quoting him verbatim, Lewis says, learning another language is not only learning different words for the same thing, but learning another way to think about things. At Unisa, we've got Language Festival through the College of Human Sciences under the Executive Director, Professor Z.Z. Ngosi, who is here. We have Multilingual Spelling Bee. It started in Limpopo with 4 languages, and then it spread across the country with all official languages. We have got a Multilingual Proverbs Dictionary, which started with 4 languages, and now it has all languages. And we also have other projects that relates to multilingualism. So Unisa has the opportunity to become a model institution, demonstrating to the continent and the world how indigenous languages can thrive in higher education. And such leadership would honor both Luthuli's legacy of dignified resistance and the global commitment to linguistic diversity. Actually, Premier, when we are reporting on the decade of indigenous language, the government, through the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, they draw the report from Unisa because of our projects. And we know that indigenous languages are hardly used in classroom, on television, radio, and even social spaces. And even if they are used in social spaces, they are contaminated with code switching. South Africans are a code switching people due to the fluidity of languages in the country as a result of migration, urbanization, friendship, marriage, and other factors. The term code switching refers to the use of more than one language in a single conversation. I often heard people in Cape Town saying, "Oh, brother waki." At first, I didn't understand what they mean when they say, "Oh, brother waki." But perhaps all is not lost, as John Westenberg gives us a light and a glimmer of hope. And this light is not hills and mountains. And storytelling can spark a passion for reading from a young age. And it is important for a child's development. And it allows children to experience different worlds, country traditions. And the advantage of story has been narrated. The griot, who is the storyteller, has control of his story and need not copyright it, but copyleft it. The griot can still share this story with others at his leisure, thereby creating many copies of the stories. So in the spirit of the National Development Plan, ladies and gentlemen, We should participate fully in efforts that liberate ourselves from conditions that hinders flowering of our talents. And one such is to teach our children to read in indigenous languages. We should love reading. All our citizens read, write, and converse and value ideas and thoughts, lest we look back so that we do not turn into a pillar of salt. This way, our story will keep growing as if spring is always with us. And once we utter the dream of a rainbow, we will see and live it and not curve over the sky. And if everyone sweeps the front of their yards, the entire neighborhood will be clean. Let us encourage our children to read and read and read. And ladies and gentlemen, a story is incomplete until I tell my story. You tell your story to make our story a complete story. And as people capture their own stories, to quote Winston Churchill, history will be kind to them because they will be writing it. And as his nemesis would say, in response to him, the victors will never be asked if they tell the truth. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, a bird sings not because it has an answer, but because it has a song. Ladies and gentlemen, that was not my song. It is the VC's song in absentia. And I sang it with a terrible voice. The proverb highlights the positive impact of welcoming guests and the reciprocal nature of hospitality. Welcome to the University of the Land, the colossal from which we can develop and preserve our indigenous languages and all of the rainbow's languages, and most in the know and in the leadership are the product of this noble institution. Our Chancellor, Thabo Mbeki, our President, Cyril Ramaphosa, our late State President, Madiba, they are all the alumni of this institution. This is the fountain from which the students quench their education thirst. Welcome, Karibo Yetu, I thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Professor Ngwepe, for making everyone feel at home. Thanks for the speech and sharing such an important history of our African languages and those jokes. We really needed a good laugh. By the way, Professor Ngwepe is the recipient of the Unisa 2019 Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Research. This very institution honored him with an award for an excellent performance in research. Are we not going to put our hands together for Prof? It does not matter where you are coming from. What matters is where you are going. I get it, Prof. Not my words, but an inspirational message that motivated Prof to work hard and that he shared after receiving that award in 2019. We are proud of you. Prof mentioned something very important during his speech now. He spoke about teaching our children to read. Shout out to Miss South Africa 2025, Kawekazi Mazeleni. She is the author of an isiXhosa children's book titled Amasele Amdaka, The Dirty Frogs, Dinkankane tse ditshila. She is indeed a role model to the young ones. Can we have some entertainment? Re a tseba hore koloi e tsamaya ka mafura, diesel kapa petrol, le gona ge le batho re batla boithabisonyana. We need some entertainment to boost our energies. Let's give it up for Session Friends. They are here to entertain us this evening.
I remember Mama and the love that she gave. I'm leaning by her bedside. I can still hear my Mama say, the people are depending on you, child, so don't you let them down. Yes, I remember my Mama in a happy way. I remember Mama and the love that she gave. I'm leaning by her bedside, but I can still hear my Mama say, the people are depending on you, child, so don't you let them down. Yes, I remember my Mama in a happy way. I remember my Mama in a happy way. We went to school with holes in our shoes. We didn't have much, but God saw us through. Mama kept the family together. Oh, yeah. I remember my Mama in a happy way. Yeah. I remember my Mama in a happy way. I remember my Mama in a happy way.
Wow, wow, wow. That performance took my breath away. I nearly shed a tear. Let's give them some love once again. Ladies and gentlemen, a quick announcement. If you need medical attention, there's a team there by the door. They are ready to assist. Should you need any assistance with regards to your health, there is a team there by the door. They are going to help you. Remember, this is the 7th annual Chief Albert Luthuli Lecture 2025 under the theme Reclaiming African Languages, Identity, Knowledge and Educational Transformation. You would recall that African languages were very important to Chief Albert Luthuli. He even established Zulu language and cultural society in 1935. May his soul continue to rest in peace. Now I'm going to ask a representative from the Luthuli family to join me on stage to share with us what the family has prepared for us this evening. The family is represented by Chief Albert Luthuli's grandson, Mr. Thenjiwe Luthuli. Sir, the platform is yours. Let's give a hand to him, please.
Sanbonani, Nda, Tobel, Abshini, Chai Ush, Inkoi. Good evening. Program Director, Memu Fuke, the Acting Vice Chancellor for Research, Prof. Mwepe, our esteemed guest of honor, Ambassador Mtintso, Prof. Sikhalo of the Albert Luthuli Research Chair, the Premier of Gauteng, Ntateli Sufi,
All esteemed guests, all protocol observed. We meet at an exciting time for us as a family, following the seminal judgment delivered by the Pietermaritzburg High Court. The judgment that found that our grandfather, father, patron, died as a consequence of an orchestrated death. By all accounts, this judgment has been widely embraced as a vindication of what many South Africans, including our family, believed for almost 6 decades, that his was an orchestrated assassination. Turning to the question of language, one can only imagine the broader reach and impact this judgment could have had it been delivered in one of our indigenous languages, particularly isiZulu, which is his language and area of origin. Not specifically, but particularly. Courts in parts of our country have actually been very progressive and have begun delivering judgments in indigenous languages with profound embrace by broader society of findings that are made. And this enhances the legitimacy of the broader judicial system anchored within society. The subject of today is seldom associated with Chief Albert Luthuli, yet formed a significant part of his broader societal outlook. As a teacher at Adams College, he taught Zulu history, was leading in Zulu choral music, and many other activities aimed at the preservation, restoration, and advancement of the Zulu language. In his early years, working with his mentor, John Langalbalele Dube, one of the founders of the African National Congress and the founder of the first newspaper published in isiZulu, Ilanga laseNatal, he came to appreciate the power of language, not just as a medium of communication, but in unifying society around a common cause. He was also a co-founder of the Zulu Culture and Language Society. The society's key objectives were to preserve aspects of Zulu culture and history from being overshadowed by Western culture and to encourage the development of a comprehensive South African culture. Therefore, today, more than ever before, effort to develop indigenous languages should proceed with undiminished resolve. And universities like Unisa and many others should actually be at the forefront of ensuring that this happens. NgesiZulu siyayisithi abangasekho bayazikhulumela. Today, a little known and appreciated aspect of his life, iyazikhulumela. We look forward to Ambassador Mtintso's address on a subject that deals with the essence of our being as a society. Good evening.
Can we show Mr. Sandile Luthuli some appreciation once again, please? The grandson to the first African Nobel Peace Prize recipient, Chief Albert Luthuli. You can never ignore that. Can you put your hands together, please? Now, let's make or pave the way for the Chief Albert Luthuli Research Chair, Professor Puleng Sekgalo, to give us the context about Unisa, Chief Albert Luthuli Research Chair lecture, and introduce our keynote speaker. Can we show Professor Sekgalo some appreciation?
Ke a leboha me Mantsewa, Gauteng Premier Ntate Panyaza Lesufi, our keynote speaker tonight, me Ambassador Thenjiwe Mtintso, to the Luthuli family, the Luthuli council members, the University of South Africa executive management members who are here with us tonight, distinguished guests, bana beso, ladies and gentlemen, dumelang. Lebitso la ka ke Puleng. And for those who are Basotho, you will know what Puleng means. Ke motlali pula. I'm the one who brings rain. You know what I mean. But at the same time, Ntate Albert Luthuli's other name that is not commonly known by many people is Mvumbi, which also means rain, right? So between myself and Ntate Luthuli, there was no way it was not going to rain. But I would love to appreciate all of you for braving the rain tonight. Some of the colleagues were worried that people are not going to come, it's raining. But you are here, and we appreciate you. And we would like to believe that you are here because you understand the importance of such reflections, such conversations around important themes, such as the centering of our African languages. Each year, as the Chief Albert Luthuli Research Chair, we draw a theme for our annual lecture from the many layers of Ubaba Luthuli's life. Ubaba Luthuli understood that true freedom extends beyond political liberation to encompass cultural and linguistic sovereignty. His advocacy for nonviolent resistance was rooted in African communal values and Ubuntu philosophy, concepts that find their fullest expression in African languages. We are not just named for the sake of being named. Puleng has got meaning to it. So we speak about African languages as being integral to our identity, but also African languages and the naming as also being integral to our cosmology as well. So Puleng is just not a name, but it is an identity. It is a marker of where one comes from, one's history, but also the possibility of a future as well, because Pula itlisa bophelo akere. We would not be able to thrive, survive, or even eat if we do not have rain. When Ubaba Luthuli addressed the world from Oslo in 1961, he not only spoke as a political leader, but as a custodian of African values and worldviews. His legacy challenges us to ask, How can we claim to honor his vision of dignity and justice if we continue to marginalize the very languages that carry the philosophical frameworks that he championed? One of our very own here at Unisa, and he's here with us tonight, Professor Kwesi Pra, asserts that no society has ever developed on the basis of a borrowed language. His argument is a sober reminder that linguistic dependency translates to intellectual dependency. When the languages of scholarship, of technology, and policy remain colonial, knowledge itself becomes a foreign project. Imagine a scientist explaining astrophysics in isiZulu, or a philosopher exploring ethics in Yoruba. Such possibilities represent more than linguistic translation. They symbolize epistemic liberation. African languages also carry unique epistemologies because embedded in them is the wisdom about our ecology, about our social ethics, and our human coexistence. These languages encode relational worldviews and environmental sensibilities that could enrich global conversations on sustainability and peace, some of the challenges that we are confronted with right now in the world. We speak about climate change, and we are also very much aware of the perpetual wars that are currently happening in different parts of the world. How can we make sense of these within the African frameworks in centering our African languages? Ali Mazrui, a prominent Pan-Africanist intellectual, warned that Africa risks becoming a continent of interpreters rather than innovators if it fails to reclaim the languages of its intellect. Thus, linguistic revival is not merely cultural reclamation, it is the foundation of intellectual sovereignty. As we find ourselves, as Professor Ngwepe reminded us also earlier, within the United Nations International Decade of Indigenous Languages, our mandate has never been clearer, nor our moment more opportune. So this conversation, this reflection tonight, and the keynote that we're going to have tonight speaks to us responding to this decade. The timing of the UN International Decade for Indigenous Languages is significant. It represents global recognition that linguistic diversity is as critical to human survival as biological diversity, and that the loss of languages represents an irreplaceable loss of human knowledge and cultural heritage. We have less than 8 years, as Prof reminded us, remaining in this decade. Let us not reach 2032 having wasted this moment of global attention and commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, the Africanization and Decolonization project of Unisa and other African universities will remain incomplete as long as African languages remain marginalized in halls of higher learning. The UN International Decade of Indigenous Languages has given us a framework, a timeline, and global solidarity. We are now in the third year of this decade. History will judge whether we seized this moment or let it pass. We will tell our future generations that when the world turned its attention to indigenous languages, African universities remained silent, continuing with business as usual. And I'd like to believe Unisa will refuse to be silent. Or are we going to be able to say that we answered the call, that we transformed our institutions, and that we continued and contributed to the global movement for linguistic justice? I shall leave us with these provocations for us to ponder on. As the Luthuli Research Chair, we do a lot of community projects. Those of you who managed to arrive early might have seen some of the slides that give just an overview of some of the work that we do as the chair. And one of the projects that I would like to highlight is the current oral history that we're focusing on, that is centering the life of Umamu Nokanya Luthuli, the wife of Ubab Luthuli. And we are working with one of the communities in Davidton, young people between the ages of 12 and 17. And I'm mentioning this because we are turning the oral history academic aspect of the work that we're doing into a theater production. And we are doing this by centering the African language of isiZulu, so that the children can think, relate to history, and speak about the past and reflect the life of Umam Nokanya Luthuli using the isiZulu language. We recently staged the production in Groutville, in KwaDukuza, in KwaZulu-Natal, where Ubab Luthuli stayed with Mam Nokanya. And I remember the kids were so worried that isiZulu sabo is not good enough, abantu bazothini eGroutville. But they are speaking isiZulu, and they're speaking isiZulu so well. And for me, that really tells us that where there is a will, there is a way. We have to make an effort to ensure that we highlight and center African languages. So that is just one of the works that we're doing as the chair. I'm going to pause here as I take this opportunity now to introduce us to our keynote speaker for the night. Many of you might have the programs in front of you, so I'm not going to read everything that is there. Her bio is there. However, I would like to honor her by actually centering some aspects of who Thenjiwe Mtintso is. High Commissioner Thenjiwe Mtintso was born in Soweto to Hannah Mtintso, who was a domestic worker, and Ghana Makabeni, a trade unionist and a member of the Communist Party of South Africa. And due to financial constraints, she was forced to leave school and work full-time in various factories to finance her part-time studies at secondary school. Now that is passion for education right there. She matriculated at Damelin College and studied for a BSc at the University of Fort Hare. Being born to an activist father, it was not surprising that at university she became a member of the South African Student Organization. And that's where it all started, and the Black Consciousness Movement. Her activism in student politics led to her being detained several times by the security police in the 1970s, and her eventual expulsion from the University of Fort Hare. While in exile, she joined the ANC and its military wing, Umkhonto weSizwe. She underwent military training and rose through the ranks to become a commander of the MK. She was sent to further training in Cuba. Yes, you may. She was sent to further training in Cuba at the Fidel Valle School. After receiving military training, she worked in Lesotho with the Regional Political Military Council, which coordinated the ANC's political and military activities in that country. She later served as head of the Regional Political Military Council in Botswana and as the ANC's first chief representative to Uganda. She was elected to the ANC National Executive Committee in 1994 when we gained our independence, and in 1997 and in 2002. In March 1997, Ambassador Mtintso was appointed the first chair of South Africa's Commission on Gender Equality because of her passion for gender justice. In 2001, she and her other gender activists formed Gender Links, and she became its first chairperson. And since then, she has been active in various gender and women's structures throughout her life until now. I did say it was long, ne? Ambassador Mtintso served as South Africa's ambassador to Cuba between 2003 and 2008, Italy, 2009 to 2012, Romania, 2014 to 2016, and Spain, 2019 to 2022. In addition, Ambassador Mtintso was South Africa's High Commissioner to Malawi from 2016 to 2019, and eventually in 2022, she was appointed South Africa's High Commissioner to Namibia, a role she held until mid-2025 when she retired. She has really served the country well. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to assist me in officially welcoming Ambassador Mtintso as she prepares herself to come to the front, I would like to invite Mr. Bonga. Siyoko.
Kinako ma-Afrika mahle. Umbengwa mdwe ucima umlilo. Lapho ungafinci. Inkosi masithambe izikaka zivumile bantu bakuthi. Asothuka nganto thina singoqala zive. Tonje besijongile. Sisithi sisizwe sikhula njani singayazi imvelaphi yaso. Simanga senyoka yakhwele emthini ngenanyawo. Umuntu ongena ngqamba ukhuli. Inyathi buzwa kwabaphambili. Izembe loloko walo magwalandini. We dedicate this day to the faithful lost African generation who denounced our own African identity, a white man claim, and reclaim Western identity, a white man denounce. Now is the time, sons and daughters of the soil. Let us infuse shell into our blood to maintain pride and dignity in our veins. Language is the cornerstone of any culture. Mutu ki mutu ka batho. Masibuyeleni kundala kandalashe. Ayaw! Sithi George ubekho Nkosi uAlbert Luthuli. Kuba kanamhlanje umsebenzi wakho uyabonakala. Ayikho inkomo yobuthongo. Phakamana amaqandeni lutsha laseMzantsi Afrika. Kunike abafundi nani zifundiswa. Iqekwa likuni. Ibani ngumcephe uqandiwe kuzenzo zokhokho benu. Khazulani ubukrelekrele kwimvelaphi yenu. Qamelani ngoqamata. Zenikhumbule, the past, the present, and the future belongs to Africa. Indaba zali basumakoti eqhwesha. Qakatha ndeham. Wow!
Acting Vice Chancellor, Professor Mpong Mwepe, Gauteng Province Premier, Mr. Panyaza Lesufi, academic and non-academic staff of Unisa, my fellow panelists, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished scholars, Luthuli family representative, represented by Mr. Sandile Luthuli, ladies and gentlemen, and those connecting online. Let me first start by doing a housekeeping. Eyoqala is that you can hear my voice. I'm not trying to be American speaking with a nose. I've got flu. So the second housekeeping is, of course, you have looked at my biography and you can see that I'm an old lady. And as if that was not enough, today is my birthday. So litheko lam eli notata uLuthuli. So ngoba litheko lam, and there's combination of dimdala, abantu abadala bayathetha mos. Bayathetha. And a co-program director who's going to stop me. And nani anizuhamba because nisepatini yam apha. So we're quite clear. Let me start by talking about Tatu Luthuli's humanism and the ethics of language. It is a profound honor to stand before you at this gathering that bears the name of Chief Albert Luthuli, a man whose moral clarity and commitment to justice continues to be the guiding torchbearer to our steps towards the South Africa we want. Significantly, as it has already been said, we gather a month after our democratic courts found that, contrary to the original findings, Chief Albert Luthuli was murdered by the apartheid police and railway employees. Today, we mark and celebrate the life of this colossal teacher, traditional leader, freedom fighter, and Nobel Peace Laureate. As we gather, we must consider a question that stood at the heart of his ethical and political vision: the dignity of the African person. Today, that question summons us to a specific and urgent task of reclaiming African languages as instruments of identity, knowledge, and educational transformation. Nkosi Luthuli came into politics through education. As a trained teacher and school principal, he experienced on a daily basis how language carries identity and meaning. He argued that any system that denies its people the full dignity of their language and culture denies their humanity. For Nkosi Luthuli, African languages were not folklore. They were living archives of philosophy, of culture, of custom, knowledge, law, spirituality, and humor. He consistently, without compromise, insisted on the equal worth of African cultures and languages within a modern democratic South Africa. He opposed an education that cut African learners off from their heritage while denying them full access to global knowledge. He strongly believed that schools should cultivate personhood, responsibility, and competence. This work would be made possible when learners can think, reason, and create in the languages of their deepest understanding. Nkosi Luthuli's principles advance us beyond tokenism. Recognizing African languages as official, Tatu Premier, is not enough. They must be tools of thinking, tools of science, tools of innovation, tools of governance, tools of public life. We must also recognize that the erosion of our languages was not an incidental act of history, but a series of deliberate actions with stark patterns. These patterns saw colonial administration and missionaries produce earlier grammars and texts in African languages, often for evangelization, while elevating European languages as the language of power, advancement, and the so-called civilization. For instance, upon landing in the Cape of Good Hope in April 1652, Jan van Riebeeck wrote in his diary, I quote, "The rogues are not at all keen to part with their cattle and sheep, although they have an abundance of fine stock," close quote. Elsewhere, the architect of apartheid, Dr. Vervoet, argued that African education should be inferior to that of white education, and that Africans should only be trained to become unskilled laborers. Because of this long-term outlook, over time, English, and in many domains, Africans became gatekeepers to higher education, the professions, and public participation. This was to be followed by apartheid codification of the linguistic hierarchy. The Bantu education system narrowed curricula for African learners and instrumentalized African languages at the lower levels. This secured English and Afrikaans as language of power and privilege. The imposition of Afrikaans alongside English as a medium of instruction phases was a flashpoint for resistance, culminating in the 1976 uprisings. This is not just the rejection of the African language, the rejection of linguistic domination and educational inferiority. This was a struggle that was a rejection of the oppressive Bantu education system designed to maintain subservience of Black South Africans under apartheid system. This history did two kinds of damage. Firstly, it devalued African languages as languages of intellect. Secondly, it fractured learning by forcing cognitive development to occur in a language many children were still acquiring. The result was predictable: lower comprehension, reduced confidence, and systemic barriers to excellence. Luthuli recognized this double injury, which included cultural devaluation and epistemic injustice. He would remind us that reclaiming language is not nostalgic, but it is emancipatory. Luthuli also understood that freedom is not only the vote or the repeal of oppressive laws, it is also the restoration of memory, culture, and voice. Language and our mother tongue are where the restoration begins. Today, we speak not only of language, but of liberation, of reclaiming what was stolen, silenced, and suppressed. Language as identity. Language is not just a tool for communication. It is the repository of our soul, the mirror of our identity, and the carrier of our histories. When children speak in isiXhosa, in isiSotho, in Tshivenda, or Xitsonga, or Ndebele, they are not merely uttering words. They are invoking ancestors, cosmologies, and philosophies. Indeed, language revokes the connection to ours by essentially being the vessel for cultural heritage, history, traditional knowledge, and identity. Thus, language lost is a unique cultural knowledge, experience, and identity loss. Consequently, it would be very difficult to communicate with one's ancestors in the language I have chosen to deliver this lecture on. Imagine if I were to talk to our ancestors ndibiza amadlozi in English, ndibize izinyanya ngesingesi, ndinqule ngesingesi. It was Tata Mandela who reminded us that, I quote, "If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart," close quotes. Of course, Tata would also have said that if you talk to a woman in her language, we're not yet there. This quote emphasizes the power of connecting with people on an emotional level through their native language. By enforcing language preference on the masses of our people, colonialism did not only steal our land, it also colonized our minds. Thus, Kenyan author Ngugi wa Thiong'o, in Decolonizing the Mind, reminds us that, I quote, "Language as culture is collective memory bank of a people's experience in history," close quotes. Consequently, the colonial system told us that our languages were inferior, that our knowledge systems were primitive, and that our tongues were unfit for science, law, or governance. It replaced our oral traditions with foreign scripts, our proverbs with imported idioms, and our epistemologies with Eurocentric paradigms. It is also relevant that the custodians of our culture and language, the women, were further robbed of their role as transmitters of cultural values and history through Intsomi, and as Intsomi in English what they are, and Amabali. It is through the soothing lullabies to the dozing and ailing babies that the tapestry between past, present, and future that women have and continue to commute back and forth from the annals of our proud past and into our future aspirations. One such lifelong custodian was Mam Ruth Mompati, who bemoaned the loss of religious and cultural identity in which families and communities are built because of apartheid, which undermines the African sense of belonging to one another. She says, I quote, "You cannot tear communities apart, destroy property, and undermine cultural values without eroding the sense of self-esteem and commitment to compassion and tolerance, which characterize the community from which I came." The distant memory of these values is, however, still part of the African collective past. It must be brought back into the present in a manner that enables us to cope with the challenges of our times. She speaks of the emphasis of competitiveness, individualism, and aggression in contemporary society as needing to be tempered with traditional values of African communality, cooperation, and tolerance. The values Mam Ruth speaks of are wrapped in the cloth of language. Hence, to reclaim our language is to reclaim ourselves. Mme Ruth spoke isiTswana to any South African that she met. She did not worry that you did not understand isiTswana, but she found it reasonable that you should be understanding isiTswana if you are an African. Distinguished guests, I must say, in recent times, I've seen a resurgence of reclamation of our culture and heritage, be it the banging stages and sounds of amapiano and Afrobeats, which are belted in modernized Tsotsitaal and Pidgin English, I suppose also in the Pretoria Tal and Pidgin English, or be it the woven patterns of the Maxhosa brand, which reminisces whilst modernizing our original tapestry. However, at the same time, as we have attempted to maintain our cultural practices, we have battled with maintaining the core meaning. For instance, I have often witnessed Qasiyala. Again, there's no English translation for Rupial, but it would be an equivalent of giving advice to the newlyweds. We do this ukuyala in the mother tongue, which is often above the comprehension of the newlyweds, resulting in the core messages being lost. It was Mazisi Kunene who aptly observed that, I quote, "Nguni concepts are not easily translated into English and can acquire enormous orientation or reinterpretation, and may I add, they may be misrepresented." Equally, I have also witnessed that when it comes to transmitting in African languages to our grandchildren, our values, culture, customs, beliefs, principles, they are also lost in translation. Worse still, our grandchildren are often most embarrassed by the use of our African languages in both formal and informal setups. More embarrassing is when our accents do not conform to common English parlance. I tried to teach my grandchildren to speak Xhosa, so I put a rule at home that we don't speak English before 9 in the morning, and we don't speak English after 5, because between 9 and 5 are working hours, so we can speak English. But the simple response was that, "Oh, okay, Makulu, we won't speak then." Unzima. Now it's going to be Christmas time, and amongst the Xhosas it's going to be time for imigidi. And the urbanites, the urban South Africans or Africans are going to go to the rural areas, and it's going to be a society, as elders try to communicate with their urbanized, deculturalized English-speaking grandchildren. Kuzawuba nzima. Kuzawuba nzima. Language and knowledge. Let us be clear, African languages are not just cultural artifacts. They are intellectual systems. Embedded in isiZulu is a philosophy of communalism and Ubuntu. In Sepedi, a logic of relational ethics and morality. In isiNdebele, a cosmology of land and spirit, and so on and so forth in the other languages. Yet, our universities continue to teach African history in English, African philosophy in French, African law in Dutch. This is not education, it is epistemic violence. I'm happy that there are these educated people here that can actually sort this out for ourselves. We must ask, what knowledge is lost when we translate Ubuntu into English? What nuance disappears when we teach African medicine without its linguistic context? What wisdom is erased when we silence the tongues of our grandmothers? Reclaiming African languages is not nostalgic, it is revolutionary. Indeed, the clarion call by W.B. Kgorong, which he uttered decades ago, I quote, "Zemkinkomo magwalandini." Inkomo are our heritage. Our language and culture must not be left grazing unattended, lest they be lost. This implies that our valuable assets, including our land, culture, and languages, have been stolen due in part to our own very inaction. I must say here that my co-writer of this paper is my granddaughter, who is a Xhosa lady of 32 years. But when she was pronouncing Kgorong, not once, not twice, but several times, she pronounced it as Rubusana. Also, interestingly, the first convention on national dialogue was in English. It was here. And we were dialoguing amongst ourselves as South Africans, trying to find solutions, South African solutions to our problems, but we're all dialoguing in English. This is South Africa. The Department of Basic Education has explored strengthening mother tongue-based bilingual education beyond grade 3, with pilots in several provinces and growing consensus amongst researchers and practitioners. At universities, multilingual language policies exist, encouraged by the 2020 policy framework for the realization of South African languages in higher education. Institutions like Stellenbosch, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Northwest University, University of the Western Cape, and others are developing terminology, corpora, and parallel medium or multilingual teaching in selected programs. Progress is uneven, but momentum is real. The public debate is also robust, with some parents and educators wanting English for socio-economic mobility. However, researchers and practitioners the world over have put a strong evidence base that displays that sustained mother tongue instruction alongside high-quality second language teaching in both the home language and English over time. As a result, the decolonial turn has amplified calls for African languages not just as subjects, but as mediums of knowledge production, research, and professional practice. This is the heart of today's conversation. Do we treat African languages as school subjects or as full instruments of understanding the world? Let us imagine a university where a thesis on African astronomy is written in isiZulu, is defended in Sepedi, and archived in Chivenda. That is not just transformation, it is decolonization. After all, in Black Skin, White Masks, Frantz Fanon reminds us that, I quote, "To speak a language is to take on a world and a culture." Steve Biko once reminded us that the the most powerful weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Through Black consciousness, he called on us to reclaim our sense of self, our names, our stories, and our languages. For Biko, language was never just words. It was the vessel of our being, the mirror of our culture, and the rhythm of our pride. It was in this spirit that Black consciousness became a potent tool, not of rebellion alone, but of renewal. A call to free the Black mind from the centuries of silence and self-doubt. Biko taught that true liberation begins within, with pride, with dignity, and with the courage to define ourselves for ourselves. To speak our languages without shame is to declare that we are whole, that we are enough, and that our identity is not to be translated, but it is to be lived. Perhaps we need to, and Dr. Premier, we should refer this to you as government. Perhaps we need to re-inject Black consciousness into our way of consciousness, into our way of thinking, into our way of life. And our cultural heritage must be a daily lived experience, not only to spring up on us in September and slumber throughout the year. However, we must also recognize that our culture and language are not static nor stagnant. They must progress to meet today's realities while casting a light into the future. The progression of our languages must flow like streams into a river and eventually conquer the oceans. I suppose Isipitoli becomes part of this. Our languages must grasp new concepts and set themselves as a launching pad for a new world order where Africa assumes her objective, subjective, and rightful place amongst the nations and economies of the world. Thus, we must strongly align our institutions and nations with Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and its aspirations, especially aspiration number 5, which speaks to, I quote, an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics, close quote, so as to celebrate and preserve African history and cultural heritage. Of course, there is the debate about which language would be the African language. The AU tried to introduce Swahili so that all of us would learn this. But in South Africa, I've not seen it yet introduced, even in the primary schools. I've seen Mandarin being introduced, but not Kiswahili. The evidence, language as a tool of thinking. In any case, international and local research is remarkably consistent in presenting evidence on the power of utilizing indigenous languages. Learners grasp complex concepts more effectively when taught in a language they command deeply, especially in mathematics, science, and social reasoning. Strong first language foundation accelerate second language acquisition. They do not hinder it. Transitional models that switch too early at grade 4 often produce a double deficit, weak subject knowledge, and weak second language proficiency. Mother tongue-based bilingual education, extending the home language as a medium of instruction while systematically building academic English, yields superior outcomes by upper, primary, and beyond. In short, teaching through African languages is not an obstacle to global competence. It is a pathway to it. You have just to look at the genesis of Mandarin to better grasp this. Addressing the common concerns. In adopting these Pan-African language approaches, several areas of common concern have arisen. Firstly, the question, will African languages instruction isolate learners from global knowledge? This question is often presented as a deterrent. The answer to the question is a vehement no. Bilingual models strengthen both content mastery and English proficiency. Translation, parallel texts, and multilingual scholarship connect learners to global debates. The second binding constraint often raised, are there enough resources? This is raised as if there's ever been any enough resources in South Africa. Like any of our socio-economic challenges, we can answer that there are not yet enough resources, but we do believe that a coordinated national investment can change this rapidly. This must be complemented by technological advances and innovations, such as AI-related large language models, open licensing, public-private partnerships, and digital platforms that can reduce costs and accelerate scales. What is needed is just the will and the commitment. And this, of course, has got to begin right at the top. The third limitation often presented is, what about linguistic diversity? There are many African languages, and yet this diversity is what makes us a nation rich in culture. Our answer ought to be, start with the most widely spoken language regionally, build articulation routes for others, support additive bilingualism where classrooms are mixed. Finally, the most irritating question often raised is, will standards fall? Of course, each time you talk African or you talk Black, the question of standards immediately arises. However, we all know that standards rise when comprehension rises. Rigor rests on clarity of thought, not on the difficulty of the medium. What would Chief Luthuli ask of us? Kosi Luthuli would ask whether our educational arrangements honor the equal worth of every child. He would advocate that every child, especially the African child, ought to have a place in the sun. He would also ask whether African languages are present where decisions are made. For instance, we know that at cabinet they discuss in English and they take decisions in English. So their discussions and decisions are English-oriented. Where science is learned, where justice is argued, where art is created, where faith is expressed. He would ask whether the village, the township, the farm, and the city can all find themselves in the nation's knowledge systems. He would ask us to reject any trade-offs that says dignity versus excellence, culture versus competitiveness, home versus the world. For him, true freedom holds all these together in a tapestry of development and self-determination. The role of institutions and policy. We therefore take this opportunity to applaud Unisa, which is on the cutting edge of centering indigenous knowledge systems and gender justice through the Chief Albert Luthuli Research Chair. But we must go further. Government must legislate for linguistic equity in education. Publishers must invest in African language literature. Media must broadcast in community languages beyond tokenism. Bethuna, let's just talk. State lwimi zethu. And not worry about who is going to say what next. Let's talk and let's be committed to that. Finish and clear. All intellectuals must stop apologizing for our accents, our idioms, our metaphors. We must speak boldly, write fiercely, and teach unapologetically in our mother tongue. As Mazisi boldly states that, I quote, from the very beginning, I had no choice but to write in isiZulu. Language was therefore from the very beginning a combative weapon that had to be used against occupation by the foreigners. Language was also meant to operate as an instrument for the reassertion of the African values, African history, and a whole ideology justifying the existence of the African world, close quotes. In conclusion, let us remember Chief Albert Luthuli's words. I quote, "The task is not easy. It is to remake the world. To remake the world, we must remake our classrooms, remake our curricula, and remake our consciousness in Nguni, in Sotho Tswana, in Tshivenda, and in Xitsonga. Reclaiming African languages is not a cultural afterthought, it is a nation-building strategy. It strengthens identity, deepens learning, broadens participation, and multiplies pathways to excellence. Our push for indigenous languages and knowledge systems aligns with Nkosi Luthuli's insistence on human dignity, his educators' faith in understanding, and his statesman's commitment to a shared just future. Ladies and gentlemen, a democratic society will not meet its aspirations if it still relies on concepts and languages rooted in colonial languages and concepts whose definitions are defined in an identity outside its own. The Freedom Charter recognizes that, I quote, all people shall have equal right to use their own languages and develop their own folk culture and customs, close quote. Let us honor Nkosi Luthuli, not only by remembering his words, but by making our classrooms, lecture halls, courts, clinics, laboratories speak in isiZulu, isiXhosa, Sesotho, Setswana, Sepedi, Tshivenda, Xitsonga, Siswati, isiNdebele, Afrikaans, and English, the full living voice of South Africa. Because when our children can reason in the language that first taught them to name the world, they will not only understand the world better, but they will change it. As we look to the future, may we never forget that the strength of a people lies in the stories they tell and in the languages in which they tell them. Each word we speak in our mother tongue is an act of remembrance and resistance. When we preserve our languages, we preserve our dignity, our memory, and our right to shape our destiny on our own terms, in our own words. Let us also not merely reclaim African languages, let us reclaim African futures. Diabulela, enkosi, ke a leboga.
Ke lebohe lengosa la Afrika Borwa naheng ya Namibia mme Thenjiwe Mtintso. A ke re ke yena ya qetang hore re se ke ra swabela puo tsa rona tsa ka malapeng. Jwale ne ke re le nna ke bue puo ya heso ya Sesotho, ke mo lebohe ka Sesotho. Ke dumela hore Ntate Albert Luthuli mo ateng o re shebile o a bososela o thabile. A big round of applause for Ambassador Thenjiwe Mtintso. Ladies and gentlemen, what an honor to have you deliver the annual Chief Albert Luthuli lecture. Powerful message indeed, and I hope the message will spread across the societies and even reach our leaders who are not present here. I am told that there are books by Elijah Books for sale by the door. You can grab yourself a copy. If you need a book by Elijah Books, they are available for sale here at the venue. There are t-shirts as well for sale, also to support small businesses. Let's continue with our program. Let me call onto the podium another speaker, an expert in African literature and biographical studies here at Unisa, Professor Daniel Machila, to share his brief speech with us. Professor, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor Mpho Ngwebe, for introducing all our guests and Unisa management. Thank you very much. In a brilliant exposition and analysis of the South African society titled Reclaiming African Languages, Identity, Knowledge and Educational Transformation, Ambassador Thenjiwe Mtintso has provided us with one of the freshest and most authentic portrayals of the problems of contemporary South Africa. Ambassador opened her presentation by honoring Chief Albert Luthuli, a man of high morals and his commitment to justice. She also reminds us that today we celebrate the life of this colossal teacher, Inkosi, freedom fighter, and the first Nobel Peace Laureate in the continent. The topic of today is about African languages as instruments of identity, knowledge, and educational transformation. Ambassador reminds us that language revokes connection of our ancestors by essentially being the vessel of cultural heritage, history, traditional knowledge, and identity. Focusing on African languages and marginalized communities. The intention is not to undermine the efforts that we have been made, but rather to speculate on some of the ways in which they could be strengthened. Ambassador is one of the seminal South African thinkers of the 21st century. Her works are used by contemporary launching pairs for the penetrating examination of contemporary society. Looking back at the early 20th century work of African philosophers, Ambassador has exposed the genius of one of the greatest luminaries in the intellectual pantheon of the African world, starting from her own African culture, which is correct perspective for an intellectual. She was able to enlarge her view and to incorporate the diverse perspective of the South African people. In effect, she is the prototype of the most authentic leader of her time, one who would influence generations of writers and scholars, and one who would bring into existence the transcendent vision necessary to enhance the country's move toward racial harmony and ethnic unity. The ambassador seeks to tear down the veil existing between blacks and whites in South Africa, as well as to cut to pieces the veil that remains over the eyes of blacks who have taken white reality and white definitions of blackness as their own reality. This is a remarkable admission, since there are those who believe that with the presence of Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Tutu, the World Cup, and the most progressive constitution in the world, the nation has already overcome the veils. The concept rainbowism derives from the term the rain, which was coined by Archbishop Desmond Tutu in 1994 when he referred to liberated South Africans as a rainbow people of God. But it has been shown with incredible skill that there are still veils and masks to be removed before the country can achieve its destiny. It is true that the country will achieve this goal, but we are aware of the need to attach the theoretical objectives of harmony with the practical realities that have been inherited from the legacy of the white regime. I also feel that we can have an introspection. Why did we fail as black people? Example, for the past 14 years, Department of Education did not buy books for learners at school. Teachers complained about language books and literature books. There were grammatical mistakes in books that were actually sold. The content was also poor. Unisa Press. The Department of Education failed Unisa Press. I was working closely with Unisa Press. I recruited writers of all African languages. Young and old writers submitted manuscripts. Lecturers in the Department of African Languages reviewed the manuscripts. We submitted books to the Department of Education. 23 novels were accepted by the department. The lowest mark was actually 82%. When Unisa Press wanted to submit the books, the department rejected the books. The reason was Unisa's BEE score was low. Unisa lost lots of money. Many people lost their jobs. Teaching for cultural relevance and restoration in South Africa is based upon the premise that learners are not blank slates to be written upon. In South Africa, cultural capital includes African languages, textured and complex, rich in proverbs, songs, stories, and history. Ignoring that cultural capital, we may unwittingly undermine, disparage, and negate certain types of intelligence. A tried and true educational principle is to be built on the known and to move from the known to the unknown. Culturally relevant texts and pedagogy validate learners' lived experiences, which in turn stimulates engagement and enhance self-confidence. Culturally restorative text and pedagogy redress the effects of racism and has resulted in stereotypical misrepresentation of negative affect attaching to African cultures and people. Children who go to school think education simply means eloquence in foreign language. And they look down upon their culture. They feel ashamed of their language. They do not pursue their language so that they can be proud of it. Africans, my people, we are lost. We are enslaving ourselves in our own country. We will soon become duplicates of foreign cultures, that is, people without cultural heritage. Can we be anything in the world if we do not know our identity? How can other nations respect us? Look at the way the Chinese and the Indians uphold their customs, their practices and their languages. Africans, rouse yourselves. Wake up and be proud of your language. Teach your children to love and to pray in their language. African people cannot give up their language, culture, and spiritual heritage. They must nurse and nurture it. They must preserve it jealously. They must rekindle a belief in the best values of Africa. They cannot abandon generations of African knowledge, wisdom, proverbs, science, literature, orature, and technology without reflection. Unfortunately, even after many years, some Africans are still fearful of liberation. They are not aware that they are on the brink of a new day. There are no excuses now because we know the pattern. We must change the language of victimhood. We cannot be a beggar people, not even in terms of ideas and opinions. We must take our seats at the banquet armed with our own histories, myths, ancestors, and weapons of knowledge. Raymond gives another beautiful analogy of people who are fearful of liberation. As she says, thousands and thousands of years ago, Jewish people were slaves in Egypt. Like slaves everywhere, they suffered greatly and they had a dream of freedom. The people didn't want to go because of fear. The choice people must make is never between slavery and freedom, but between slavery and the unknown. The story of the Jewish did not happen thousands of years in the past. It is happening now. It is the story of every black person everywhere. It is our story in South Africa. The slavery that keeps us from following our goodness is an inner slavery. We Africans are trapped by ideas of worthlessness and lack of self-esteem, inferiority, or ignorance, enslaved by notions of victimhood and entitlement. The black man's story is about fear of change, about clinging to the places and behaviors that are small and hurtful, because letting go of them will mean facing something unknown. Freedom is frightening now as it was thousands of years ago. It will always require a willingness to sacrifice what is most familiar for what is most true. Raymond says the capacity to know and to live by the innate goodness in us is to serve and belong to one another and to life. Our country needs to establish educational institution that teaches African languages, stories, songs, ethos, values, poetry, art, history, names of astronomical objects, the sun, the moon, the stars, and worldview. The teaching of African languages is declining at schools. Language is intrinsic to the expression of culture. As a means of communicating values, beliefs, and custom, it has an important social function and fosters feelings of group identity and solidarity. It is how culture and its traditions and shared values may be conveyed and preserved. Therefore, we need to be proud of our continent and our language and teach our children about Africa. Yes, wise, prudent, and astute ways can be translated in African languages, e.g., rhetoric of Dr. Thabo Mbeki regarding African landscape, plants, mountains, rivers, animals, tribes, kings and queens, countries, and the continent. And that's how I actually decided to translate this. Are nna ke mo Afrika, pelo ya me e mo lefatsheng la dithota, lefatshe la madiba, lefatshe la dithaba, lefatshe la dibaka, la dinoka di Mansisiti, lefatshe la ditlhare tse di tala ngwaga o tšhese, lefatshe la mawatle a magolo, lefatshe la ditlha di fetogang jaaka leobu, ditlha tse di tlhalosang lefatshe la boraitsho mogolo. Mmele wa me o sule dikgapetla. Okay, you can. Mmele wa me o sule dikgapetla ka ntata ya mariga a matala, o bolailwe ke semathana se se wang le ratharatha se tswang godimo le godimo. Semathana se simolotse go gakologa, se gakolosa ke bothitho jwa letsatsi la Afrika, Afrika lefatshe la letsatsi. Dikgadima di simolotse go duma, di lela di laletsa medupi pula ya namagadi. Matlakadibe a tla a sa lalediwa, gabenya ga thunya ga ba ga utlwala mogosi wa letshogo le tsholofelo go utlwala monko o monate wa tlhago ke monko wa ditšhefe dithunya baagi ba naga ya Afrika dithaba tse di goletseng godimo tsa maluti di tugile semelemethe metsi a mmala wa sebilo a lekwa ikele ga mmogo le thugela metlhaba ya sekaka sa kgalakgadi tsotlhe tse di tshwana le boididi jwa batho mo seraleng sa tlhago serala se mo go sona re diragatsang tiro tsa bosilo tiro tsa metshameko ya letsatsi ka nako dingwe fa ke tsenwe ke letshogo ke ikutlwa ke akabala gore ke ipitse mo Afrika go itekanya le tilodi ya dikgaga kgotsa tshetlha ya dipoa tlou ya mmadisanyana kgotsa tshepe ya naga rintlha wa phiri kgotsa mokwepa o montsho le fa e le monang o o hupileng botlhoko fela botho bo teng kgotlhe selebego sa naga ya boraitshomogolo ga go ope yo o ka nkganetsang fa ke re nna ke mo Afrika Priestley Isaka Seme ka 1904 kwa University of Columbia, New York, o ruta makgowa ka tsosoloso ya Afrika. A re mela sa dingwaga se se ntshang dithunya ka ditlha re bona sona torong tsa rona. Moraga humo la madiba a gaetsho kgoro bulega kitso e tswe phuphung kitso ya diketekete tsa dingwaga kitso e robetseng fifing le lentsho fifi le apogang mosong ono le apolwa ke phatsimo ya tsatsi la Afrika tsatsi le le phatsimang jaaka monyenyo wa se wa godimo a re tlang le nna kwa Egepeta wa le kgorokgoro Thebese toropo ya kgoro di le legolo kgalalelo ya maropi a badimo ba Afrika dikago tse kgologadi le gobota lwa lefatshe piramidi tsa Egepeta tse di sa gaisiweng ke dipe di fikantswe tsa Afrika ga ela bagale di lejwa ka leitlho le le losi kgalaletso ya Egepeto ke kgalaletso ya Afrika segopotso sa bogeleke le manontlhotlho a Afrika na tlhalefi tsa Gerika di ithutile ka le ke mosetsana o motshwana na teori ya Pythagoras e ribolotswe ke mang ke moruba moratwa wa thaka tse digolo na thuto ya bokwadi e tswa kae e tswa thobeng tse khunwana se amusa masiela na Makeda o ne a dirang kwa Judea go ruta Salomo go lepolola malepa go loma Salomo tsebe gore botlhale bo gaisa gauta le solofera bonatetsa go gaisa dinotshi bo itumedisa go gaisa bojalwa ke kgalalelo e gaisang letsatsi ke motswedi o itumedisang pelo ke lesedi le le fatlhosang motho ke tlhoro e sireletsang tlhogo ke thebe e femelang pelo ke mphashane o babelang lonao ke bua le lona bakwadi ba dikwalo ba le dirisang sekwalo go kwala boammaaruri tlhamang dikwalo ka nonofo ya Afrika le kwale ka setšhaba se se kgobotleditsweng tšhaba se tsholetsweng seriti ke borantlatlana tšhaba se se tsholetsweng ke ledi tsa mahutsana tšhaba se se goberegilweng go nna makgoba bogoba ga bo a tima malakabe a go batla kitso le bue gore Afrika o kgaotse ketane tsa bokgoba e tla re fa popo e emisa batlotlegi ka dinao Afrika a balwa le bagolwane matona popo jaaka ditlhare tsa segwa sa gagwe le maungo a sona mokaloba o rutse mo phuphung ya baswi o paletse molelo wa tšhaka ya dira Afrika o tsena ka leobo la kgoro o tsena kgorong ya gauta a tshotse sekgele sa bogang ka lepeng thank you
Let's give a hand to Professor Daniel Matila, please. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Toto Kiso e Munati, Nati Elekaneti, Kabukheleke Bohi. Professor Matila, thank you so much. This is the 7th annual Chief Albert Luthuli Lecture at the University of South Africa, Unisa. This is the biggest university in Africa. Tag us on hashtag 7th Chief Albert Luthuli, hashtag Research Chair Founders Lecture, hashtag Luthuli Museum. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to call onto the podium another speaker, the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Documentation Center Coordinator at the University of Northwest, Ms. Kumo Feni. Mefeni, ke kopa o tle sefaleng, o tlo re tshetlehela puo.
Program Director, Reli Sufi, esteemed guests, students, scholars, my fellow academicians, I would like to take this opportunity to really be thankful for this invitation to give my address at the 7th Albert Luthuli Memorial Lecture. As said, my name is Kumo Feni. I am aware that a lot of people are asking themselves how I have two identities in one. Ke Motswana, ke setlogolo sa bahurutsi bo banyane. Gate di tshwenya di ile masimu. David eteletswe pele ke tshegadi. Roto sala ko morago a di retolola. Lentswe la tshwenyana. Muhuruti, jaanong ke tsero ko Eastern Cape, ko Maxesibeng, Amambatane, Machaya, Khandanyawana, Machina ebheke njengomntana. Yo ke mmagwe tiro e bidiwang a re tshamekeng. Jaanong ha lo nkutlwa thata ke ntse ke bua ka metshameko ya bana. Lo tlhaloganyehela gore mme Kumo ke mmueledi wa bana. Chief Albert Luthuli is a stalwart, was a stalwart, and will continue to be a stalwart because in his time, he foresaw the Agenda 2063, the Africa we all want. The Africa we all want is one that is led by Africans. We want African solutions to African problems by Africans. Ladies and gentlemen, according to scholars, children in developing countries ought to receive better training in order to provide an efficient future workforce so as to improve national income, especially in light of the fourth industrial revolution. According to Kim, 2008, language is a challenge to digital education for indigenous children. And I think I speak for all bomampimpa na ba ba dutseng go gae ba ba sokolang go tlhaloganya gore me ga ba sokole thata jalo me gone ba tla ba sokola fale le fale go tlhaloganya gore ba tsamaise jang tsa maranyane. Concurrently, Hanaway asserts that technology-based learning in South Africa is limited by the language barrier because 80% of internet is written in what? In English. And does that mean we don't have African programmers? Does that mean we don't have African digital scientists? Chief Albert Luthuli gave this speech in absentia to one meeting that he could not attend. It was conducted in KZN. He said, "I regret very much this forced absence, but I assure the powers that be that nothing they can do will disunite us or dampen our resolve to gain freedom during our lifetime. Our common cause, whose justice is acknowledged by progressive world opinion, will always arouse in us a spirit of comradeship in arms. This feeling of oneness and unquenchable longing of the human spirit for freedom give me, and I trust all of you, to the courage to risk all for the emancipation of Africa in their land. Never forget that Africans are prisoners in their own castle." This was written many years ago. At this moment, when you are assembled in conference, hundreds of Africans in this province are homeless. This sounds like it was written yesterday. Hundreds are without employment, and practically all of those in employment receive uneconomic wages. All Africans are denied the freedom to seek work where they desire. Hundreds of children who desire to be in school cannot be on account of the inadequacy of school facilities. And ladies and gentlemen, this begs the question. We spoke about this, and Ndate also spoke, a professor also spoke about this. We still have differences in the education quality in South Africa. What is wrong? Why is the majority black attending in the is classified as first quintile, and the minority white goes to fourth quintile schools? Why is there a difference in the quality of education? Chief Albert Luthuli fought against this. In reference to the Bantu Education Act, Chief Albert Luthuli said, "This is the most poisonous of the segregation laws in that it seeks to indoctrinate future generations of Africans with the apartheid philosophy, which, as we have shown, means separate and unequal, and therefore means a permanent domination of whites over blacks." This evening, or this afternoon, as I was traveling here, I was reminded of my high school years, where when a teacher wanted to silence us in class, she would just say, "Guys, you can talk however much you want, but start talking and laughing in English." And all of us will go silent, because we cannot imagine all the naughtiness we want to say in English. So we were limited. That's how she got us. And it is true that in our society today, the English language or foreign languages are seen as standards of intelligence. So unfortunate. Chief Albert Luthuli says, "It is your privilege and mine, and responsibility and honor, to design and build the kind of Africa you would like to see in existence within the next 50 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I take this as a very valid challenge that it's possible for us to achieve. Because Chief Albert Luthuli, as a principal himself, had to engage with these matters on a daily basis. And I believe as teachers, as lecturers, as academicians, we can attest to the fact that this is possible. But let me still go back and digress to my area of excitement. I will go back to Indigenous Games, the unforgotten leg of Indigenous language preservation, protection, and promotion. Imagine with me a classroom where every child learns at their own pace, where every child can relate to the language of the teacher, where every child's education is child-centered, meaning that the child looks forward to learning. We used to have this kind of picture somewhere before colonization came into Africa, And it was not under a classroom setting, no. It was next to a grandma grinding mealies. And there were 2 or 3 kids imitating as they are singing, Raho sila mele mele ko khamatsale, Raho sila mele mele ko khamatsale, oh dali wa tsamaya, lerato le fedile, dali wa tsamaya, lerato le fedile. And it was a fun moment. It was learning, but it was fun. And the child did not have to sit in front of an angry teacher who's worried about submitting these marks to the SGB or to the HOD, whoever. Can you imagine with me an education system which allowed children to explore their talents without the pressure of adapting to a model that does not even accommodate their skills? Pre-colonial era, and some cultures still practice this, we have lebollo, we have bohwera, and little girls and boys transition into real human beings in these schools. In these schools, there is no question of affordability. There is no bullying, because all of us are eating from the same plate. In these schools, all of us carry our totems, so we all relate to each other. Even if you're not my mom's son or my father's daughter, so we are all mfenes. In this school, we are united. We are not forced to be united. We like to be united in this school. So what happened to our traditional schooling system? I was asking the policymakers of IKS recently, why is lebollo not yet qualified under the NQF system? Why do we not have a course that qualifies lebollo? Because lebollo is literally life skills in action. Today in South Africa, we have a very high unemployment rate. Many PhDs, many bachelors, many masters, but very high unemployment. During lebollo, we had people who could make skin products, and they would sell, and they would survive and subsist, and they would teach others, and the knowledge ran from one generation to another. And we started knowing in that households, they are blacksmiths. In that households, they deal with sheepskin. Where did we go wrong? Chief Albert Luthuli struggled for the Freedom Charter, which was adopted in 26 June 1955. My mom and dad had not even started thinking of courting by that time. And I can imagine he probably never thought of this Freedom Charter giving so much influence to CAPS as we know it today. He said that the doors of learning and culture shall be opened. In the present day South Africa, we have the CAPS curriculum that emphasizes the inclusion of indigenous knowledge systems in the classroom. However, even though we have this in the CAPS curriculum, we do not have it as a practice. It is time for universities, researchers, and scholars to ask ourselves, and the government actually, what are we doing? We cannot always be blaming the apartheid system. We cannot continue relying on the legacy of colonization or request the colonizer to come and lead our initiatives. But we have the CAPS curriculum today, and today we have the IK Act of 2019, which says South African indigenous people have the right to protect, promote, manage, and disseminate their knowledge systems. Now we have empowered ourselves. But could it be that we are sleeping on the duty? I'll leave that for us to ponder. Our present education system, we all bemoan that it creates dependence, much to the demise of contribution to the country's economy. This is in direct contrast of indigenous-based education systems. I've made only one example. There are many of those. I've made only one example, which equip an individual with proper life skills. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People states that indigenous people have the right to revitalize, use, develop, and transmit to future generations their histories, language, oral traditions, and philosophies. It also says they have the right to establish and control their education systems and institutions in their own languages. It says that states like South Africa should help indigenous peoples to take effective measures, especially to support children, including those who are outside their communities like the Khoi and the San, to access education in their own culture, and the education must be provided in their Nama and their Kgorong and their San language. That is what the UNDRIP says. Now, I would just like to share a few examples of games and how they have been used to, and the research that has been reported on how they have impacted language teaching and language preservation for little children. Unisa and Dangani are researchers based in Zimbabwe. They investigated games. The title of their study says, Efficacy of Indigenous Games on Literacy and Numeracy Development in Preschoolers in Zambia. What they say is games are important for teaching reading skills. We have been talking about reading, especially in preschool settings. And this was said by the teachers. Now, I like to make examples. I don't like to lecture or preach a lot. I'm a very practical person. It's just that I don't have my diketo here and my morabaraba here today. But when I taught my children number system, the Setswana number system, I did not have to start saying, say one, say two, say three. No, I simply invited them to play. We started singing, Mutla, udi tsebe tsebe, o matlho magolo, ga o itse go bala, nna nka go ruta, nngwe, pedi, tharo, nne, tlhano, thataro, supa, robedi, robong, lesome. And within a week, I'm talking to teachers, within a week, my kids know the 1 to 10 in Setswana, no manga business. But you go to school and you find researchers like Pinar 2008 who says children in the Northwest public schools are very difficult to teach. Are they difficult to teach? I'll leave that with you to decide. Mandondo and Tsikira, also in Zimbabwe, they say traditional children's games, their relevance on skills development among rural Zimbabwean children. They say these games help learners to develop language and vocabulary. They also allow learners to socialize. Hada Ben Glovu says teachers' experience of indigenous games in early grades. She says parents get excited when they can see their children reciting what they learned in school. but it would take millions of years for a child to recite 1 times 2 is 3. It would take forever. I talk about Hado. If Brand 2023 says efficacy of Zulu indigenous games in enhancing perceptual motor skills. He says they develop auditory comprehension and interaction. I'm deliberately reading these studies so that the floor can understand the different dimensions that indigenous games touch in terms of developing a child's literacy skills. Bayek reviewed African board games. He says African board games make children to force children to use their negotiation, decision-making, and communication skills. And there are many other games around responsive games. I'm sorry, my machine is stuck. Nyota and Mapara, Shona traditional children's games and play songs as indigenous ways of knowing. Most of these games are always played during, so there's always language happening during play. You can never play without talking. You can never play without singing. For example, Nje out of the blue, they are standing in a circle. Oh, we don't know it. No problem. So it forces even the shyest of children to participate, but in a protective circle. The child is not sitting in a square environment, they are sitting in a circle. And this circle is a very, very important philosophy in Africa. It is, Me Goduka calls it eziko, sipeka sisophula. That's a theory that emphasizes the importance of a circle where all of us sit around the fire to learn and to transmit knowledge to each other. In the Basotho games, gestures, Nsihele, Ona Balaka di Bali, she says it's important, it teaches children to call for responsorial structures in the form of dialogue. So indigenous games teach children dialogue. They teach them to talk. So before Reyaku Varsity, before we go to high school, and before we talk about mathematics, before we talk about science, we would be talking about ECD, and we would be talking about whether this child can actually tell a story, and can this child shout, can this child talk, can this child pronounce basic words and context. Lastly, I want to go to the potential of indigenous languages in the 4th IR. The world has fast become a global stage, or can I say a global village. Everyone is competing, everyone is innovating, everyone is creating, but you do not create from emptiness. You need to have a starting point, and language is that starting point because it is the library of all knowledge systems. And this is not exclusive of indigenous languages. I always say, indigenous languages are cosmic branding. It takes a person who comes from Taung, Kolokaling, to understand what someone in Taung, Kolokaling says. Sometimes my Setswana confuses people in Mahike. Sometimes they don't even hear the and today I would like to challenge all of us in this room to say, 4th IR is here and it's going nowhere, and we are soon transitioning to 5th IR. If we don't keep up, we are going to be left behind. But how will we innovate if we do not know our own knowledge system? There are so many open source softwares that are available for advancing African indigenous languages. So many of gaming softwares, so many, we can do whatever we want. We could even create our own, but I will share just a few here. The few that I've gathered include Duolingo. Duolingo is like a game that you can actually create a course in language and allow children to participate in. You can add a language like Setswana, and people can add their words within the game. You can create a course focused on vocabulary, grammar, and phrases commonly used in everyday conversations. So Duolingo is already a game that is existing. You just need to add your language corpus. Memrise is another one. You can create content such as word lists, phrases, cultural lessons. So you can actually conserve some of the words that are disappearing from the language. Then we have the one that school kids love the most, Kahoot. They play Kahoot a lot, so this one should not be a challenge. Then we have Lingodia. It's a gamified structure that motivates learners through points, badges, and levels. So Lingodia is like a game, but you can actually add your language, isiZulu, isiXhosa, isiNdebele. We have Unity, which is a game that you can also use to develop language games based on basic vocabulary to complex sentence structures. Possibilities are endless, colleagues. And from where we come from, go kgakala ko re tswang, go gaufi ko re yang. It is up to us, young people. We stand on the shoulders of giants. Mama Thenjiwe, Lebo Prof have paved the way for us. We used to be told hore black is backward, barbaric, stupid, useless. But now we know that Pythagoras actually learned their knowledge from us. We gave birth to civilization. It is about time we take our knowledge systems seriously. And that knowledge system is nowhere else than in our indigenous languages. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Re a leboha Mefeni ka mantswe a matla o nkhuluditse. Ka nnete o nkhuluditse ha o roka seboko sa heno. Jwale ke re nna ke Mosotho ha ke phepetswe. Ke Mofokeng wa ha Lemphane wa ha Mmatlapa ha le re bollwi ha o ka le re bulla ho tswa phepeng ke felletswe. I'm going to ask Ambassador Thenjiwe Mtintso, Professor Daniel Machila, and Me Khumofeni to join me on the podium for the discussion or question and answer about reclaiming African languages, identity, knowledge, and educational transformation. You will have an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to ask them questions or cast your views about the subject. But before that, we are being entertained once again. Let's give it up to an emerging poet, Miss Sina Chweni. Miss Chweni is Unisa alumni. The stage is yours, Chweni.
If I was the president of the country, I would be saying, my people. If I was a leader, I would say, my comrades. But as a student of University of South Africa, I pass my warmest greetings to you all. My name is Sina Chweni, and today I will be rendering a poem that is entitled, Ikhanche ka legae la gago wena ngwana mo Afrika, wena ngwana wa mmala wa sebilo, wena ngwana wa thari e ntsho. There is no place like home. Rena re ma Afrika borwa re bana ba mmilo wa sebilo, ikhanche ka legae la gago. They told us our tongues were too heavy, that our words could not build worlds, that wisdom must come dressed in a foreign soul. Little did they know that we are the children of the soil. Rebolela Sipedi, Sikhulumi Zulu, Stethixhosa, Ramba Chivenda, what a multilingual world it is. Oh, not forgetting the youth of 1976, the day our youth suffered for just a language neither you knew that I can't speak. They were killed for the denial of using the language, Huye More, and blood was shed all over the streets of Soweto, searching for hope in hopeless moments, and life in lifeless times, heart in heartless people. I call them heroes because I wonder, had it not been them, where would I be today? They sang freedom is coming tomorrow. Their tomorrow meant our today, and today indeed we are free. They used that saying, Nina Maburu Nani Masutu Shanganani Nibe into Yotwa. They used that say, tomorrow English shall be the language of institution. They conquered the world to conquer the mystery. Oh, the youth of 1976. Today I honor you with my art of poetry that I used to spread the mystery of our country. Amandla. Thank you.
That was so quick but powerful. I got goosebumps. Thank you so much, Ms. Sina Chweni, for that poem. Ladies and gentlemen, without waste of time, it's time for a question and answer, and I will ask our guests to join me on the podium. I have asked Ambassador Thenjiwe Mtintso, Professor Daniel Machila, and Me Kumo Feni to join me on the podium for the discussion or question and answer about reclaiming African languages, identity, knowledge, and educational transformation. You will have the opportunity to ask them questions or cast your views about these subjects. Can I share that with them? Must I tell them? Let me, good evening once again, Bomme Lintate, and welcome to the question and answer session here at the 7th annual Chief Albert Luthuli lecture taking place here at the University of South Africa, Unisa. Ke tlo qala ka our ambassador, Thenjiwe Mtintso. Honoring Chief Albert Luthuli, in what way can the promotion of indigenous languages be seen as a tangible way to fulfill the spirit of Chief Albert Luthuli? Ho ka etswa jwang ho netefatsa hore puo tsa ka malapeng di dula di le melomong ya batho ho fihlella tabatabelo ya mohale Ntate Albert Luthuli? Ambassador.
Thank you. I was trying to whisper to the program director that we answered all the questions in advance.
You did say that. You did.
I think one of the ways in which we can ensure that Chief Albert Luthuli stays in our memory and his work as we honor him is that we must popularize our veterans, our heroes and heroines. We must popularize what they stood for. And above all, what we were talking about earlier, we must speak in our own African languages, just as he had taught us to speak in our own languages at home, so that at home it does not become a difficulty in talking about Tatu Luthuli amongst ourselves as Xhosas, as Sothos, as Bedis. So if we popularize his legacy, and we popularize the language, and we ensure that the knowledge that we gather is actually embraced in our own languages, in that way we will be remembering him and making sure that his life rather stays on in our memories and is not forgotten. But we cannot then say that one day we'll gather in a meeting and discuss Tatu Luthuli, and after that we go happily our individual ways, and we will gather again when there's a lecture. It will be the 17th lecture or whatever number. We cannot do it on an annual basis. It must be a lived experience for our youth, for our grandchildren at home. Some of the things we wait for them to happen outside, whereas where everything happens, it starts at home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. That's why when I started the program earlier, I've asked you, why are you here? What do you want here? How is your presence here tonight going to benefit or impact your family members, your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues, and the entire community? Let's go to Professor Daniel Machila from University of South Africa, Unisa, on tertiary institutions. Prof, how can tertiary institutions ensure that multilingualism is not seen as a barrier, but a strength in a diverse South African context? Makala thuto e phahameng le thupello a lokela ho etsa eng ho netefatsa hore ho bua ha puo tse fapaneng ha ho nkwe e le ho kwalla ba bang mamati, empa ho nkwe e le ho ba le bokgoni ba puo le tsebo haholo jwang naheng ena ya bo rona e ntle Afrika Borwa e nang le merabe e fapaneng?
Yeah, I think it is also very important that it starts at home. And then I will give you an example. When my daughter was only 3 years old, and then I started reading Setswana to her. Every time I was actually reading stories. And then when she was 5 years old, she was reading stories for me.
Wow.
Yes.
Yes.
And then immediately thereafter, she started writing, she actually started writing in Setswana as well. The stories and translating from English as well into Setswana. And then it also helped her. So at the age of 5, in fact, at the age of 4, she won the it's actually it was an honor from Gauteng for children under 7, and then she was 4.
She was only 4.
She was only 4.
So are we going to ignore that? Are we not going to clap hands? Yes, yes.
And the last thing, I also taught her the significance of our months, each and every month in Setswana. That in Setswana we've got 13 months, and then each and every month has got only 28 days. And then whilst I was teaching her all this, she was actually painting each and every, like when we say Firikgong, we are actually looking at our first month of the year. And then Firikgong was actually named because they looked at Mufiri, and then this Mufiri, every time it would actually prepare a nest. And then thereafter, Mufiri will also lay the eggs in that. And then every time during that period, that is what happened. And hence, we actually called it Firikgong. And then Kgorong, where does the Kgorong come from? When you look at the nest of the dove, they don't actually use grass, but the Mufiri actually looked at some. He actually looks at the Mufiri looked at a small. Can I say? Twigs,
Okay.
and then so to put them together, and then Firikgong comes from that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's come to you, Mayor Kumofeni. In the workplace, what specific steps can businesses and government departments take to implement and support multilingualism in workplace? Give me hato efeng ka ho qoholleha eo dikgwebo le mafapha a mmuso a ka e nkang ho kenya tshebetsong ho bua ha puo tse fapaneng mesebetsing. Sure.
The difficult one
Sure.
for the youngest in the team. I will leave it to my elders also.
Okay.
I'll just attempt to answer as short as I am.
Yeah.
So what I have observed from the government of South Africa is that it has really tried to accommodate as many languages as possible in their publications. And I think we need to applaud that and appreciate. We see posters written in isiZulu, translated. So in one poster, you have like at least 2 or 3 local languages and maybe English or Afrikaans. So that is one of the approaches that I feel is inclusive. But I also think that furthermore, there could be special channels, maybe TV channels or special documentations that are targeting specific languages to say, okay, if we produce, for example, a policy document, we have to make sure that it is translated into all the official languages so as to accommodate all the official cultures of South Africa. And I also like to emphasize and say, including the Kroe and the San and the Nama, as they are also part of us. Thank you.
Re lebohile haholo ha jwale ke nka maikutlo kapa dipotso tsa lona e bang o na le potso o phamisa letsoho fela Mike o tla tliswa ho wena re na le potso ho ntate morao mane o tla bolela lebitso la hao le lekala le o tswang ho lona kapa the institution that you are representing.
Ke a leboha mme leina la ka ke Mmalesela Kaka o na le ntho engwe e le hore ke lemohile horeng jwale ka ma-Afrika ra e tjhaba ke o mongwe I'm one of those people who follow Taure because Taure he speaks for Africa and he's real. Until African Union has teeth and do the right thing, Africa, we are going nowhere. For example, recently, a 92-year-old man forced himself on Cameroon. African countries are clapping hands and say congratulations. Congratulations on what? On oppressing and oppressing and oppressing. As long as we don't take our mind off that colonization, white people are still taking in South Africa. Africa is the richest country on earth, but we are the poorest of the poor. What is our government doing? I will give example of Traore again. When he took power, he never bought BMWs, which our government, they come with blue lights and everything. He used a simple a military vehicle. But look at what the likes of Albert Luthuli and everything, they fought for our freedom. Only for the ANC elite to enjoy that freedom.
Only if we can focus on the subject.
No, the
We are talking
subject,
about
what I'm
African
trying to
languages
say,
that with
no.
due respect, yes.
What I'm trying to say, ma'am,
Yes.
ke hore, o boletse le ka African dignity. It starts with Africans taking Africa ba rona, and from then we can be able to speak our languages and everything. It starts why even today, for me, if I'm saying Mwanaga is educated, must go to English school. Because if I can take my child to the very same school I went to, go villaging, which is quintile 1, they're not going to learn anything. As Africans, let's get our dignity first so that we can be able to become what we want to. Otherwise, we will speak about 2030, even 2063, even 20 until we die. Thank you.
Would you like to get a response from my guest, or that was just an opinion, a view?
No, just was a comment.
Thank you.
And also telling our government they must change.
All right. Thank you so much. Another hand. People are sorted. Can we close the event? People are sorted? Okay. We have another hand there. We have another hand there. Can you please introduce yourself and the institution that you are coming from?
Sanibonani,
Sawubona mama.
igama lami nguNozuko Ndungwakwalanga. Endicelayo into enye. U-basic education wethu kumele aguqule even indaba yezikolo. Ngoba sesifumana abantwana abangalwazi ulwimi lwabo. Yindaba ye-independent institutions that are providing, are feeding our kids, Africans. And kuzoba nzima into yokubana i-higher education institution ibe fully transformed if this thing has not been dealt with from the root. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could only indicate to whom your question is directed to so that our guests are able to respond to your questions. I'm not sure who is going to be comfortable to answer to the gentleman's question, but before we answer to that question, we can take another hand. I think there's someone there. Yes, sir.
Sanibonani, good evening.
Sawubona baba.
Ngwakamkhabeli Sibongo, ngikhuluma Swati ke. So ngoba lapha bekupromote ukuthi sikhulume ama language ethu, so umbuto wami ngitawubeka ngeSwati. Siyabonga professor, siyabonga na Mam Thenjiwe. Umbuto wami nje mfishana. How do we disabuse ourselves from the narrative that when you are able to articulate yourself well in English, it is regarded as being intelligent? But when I articulate myself effectively in my mother tongue, it is never seen, it is never recognized. The main problem that we have as Africans, it is that we have been taught that a language yethu can never generate new knowledge. Before we do anything, we need to start disabusing ourselves from that angle. How do we do that? Umbuto wami ngathanza ukuthi uphendulwe ngumake Thenjiwe. Yabonga.
Okay. Re lebuile haholo e re ho arajwe dipotso se se di botsitswe ha jwale pele re nka matso a mang. E re qale ka wena ambassador.
Thank you. I guess this is what we're all about today, to try to find answers and a way forward, because the decolonization of the mind is not a one-day act or a 1 month or 1 year. It's a process that we need to ourselves commit as communities, as families, as government, to commit that we really are going to be respectful of ourselves. Because that very fact that if I speak good English, then I'm supposed to be intelligent. And if I speak good Xhosa, I am a stupid. I'm a stupid person. So it starts with us and our minds, and it then goes outside ourselves to the outer world. The outer world will not respect us if we don't respect ourselves. So we should show that respect and acceptance. Because, for instance, some of the things that you are saying, is that it's the very Africans themselves who have got a high regard for anyone who seems to be speaking in English, who seems to have acquired anything that is bigger than what is acquired by the next one who is not speaking English. So I think that that decolonization of the mind, and what I was saying as a joke, that we need to have black consciousness, conscientize ourselves, change our being, and begin to respect ourselves. And I think that will be the beginning, but it will not be the end. We need to have programs also of re-educating our communities and our society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Jolo ka ha boletsi puisano tsa mofuta ona di a tshwanela ho fella mona. Re tshwanela re be le tsona le malapeng, re tshwanela ho ba le tsona dikerekeng, re tshwanela ho ba le tsona on different social media platforms. I have indicated to my followers that I'm going to establish or create a podcast that's specifically broadcasting in Sesotho. We will speak English there and there where there's a necessity, but there's a way of promoting African languages. So thank you so much. We have come to an end of our question and answer session, unfortunately, because we are running out of time. Thanks to Ambassador Mtintso, Professor Machila, and Mefedi. Now, I'm gonna call on the chairperson of Luthuli Museum Council, Advocate Charlie Naidu, to join us on the podium to give us the closing remarks and vote of thanks. Advocate.
Good evening, everyone. Well, it's truly an honor to give the vote of thanks after experiencing a phenomenal, lectures and speeches, and so thank you very much. I just want to say a big thank you to our ambassador. I myself personally have learned so much, and looking at her CV, it's just an honor to be in her presence, and I think there's so much more. When we were in the holding room, she mentioned that she's retiring, but I think we have so much more to sit and learn at her feet. So thank you so much for gracing us with your presence and with your wisdom. Also, our minister, as some of us know, that the Luthuli Museum is an entity of Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. So I also want to thank our minister, Mr. Gayton McKenzie, in his abstention. The Deputy Minister, Alvin Boertes, also in abstention, is the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa. The Luthuli family, whose presence we have in our midst, Mr. Sandile Luthuli, thank you so much. Selo Dada Morero, in absentia as well, who's the Executive Mayor of Johannesburg. And perhaps before that, our Premier, I'm not sure if he's left us, but thank you so much for gracing us also with your presence. While we were in the holding room, also he mentioned, the fact that because he's hosting a major event in 2 weeks, he was a bit wary about the weather. And we have in our presence Puleng, who mentioned that he brings the rain, and our Chief Albert Luthuli himself, Bumbi, who also brings the rain. So we'll just pray that he has good weather when the event happens. Also to thank Professor Puleng for also being, the partnering with Luthuli Museum all these years. Thank you so much. Professor Mpo Ngope, the Acting Vice Principal, Research, Graduate Studies, Innovation and Commercialization, Unisa. Also our Acting Deputy Judge President, Mahala Lela. We met her in the holding room. I'm not sure where she is. But thank you so much for gracing us also with your presence. Honorable MB Gwala, the National Chairperson, Chief Whip, KZN Legislature, the Inkatha Freedom Party, KZN Legislature. Thank you so much. We also have in our midst a King C. Tunyane, King of the San, in absentia. Also Queen R. Shuping, Queen of the Kalagadi San. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. Professor Daniel Matjila, thank you so much, sir, for that enlightening lecture. Ms. Kumalo Feni, Northwest University. I thought I was listening to Mali Bali. I know that at least. Thank you so much. I really think that our children should be educated in the language they know and understand, and make it exciting. So you made your lecture quite exciting as well. Ms. Nozikelo Nako and the rest of the team in the Unisa Department of Institution Advancements and the organizing team. My fellow Luthuli Museum Council members and the museum management, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence, and I think also for all the arrangements, the behind the scenes, looking at the floral arrangements. Thank you so much for all the behind the scenes work that you've rendered. Esteemed guests, I hope I've not missed out anyone, but each and every one of you, thank you so much. Even the person who's cleaned the premises for us, the toilets, when I went there, it was absolutely clean. Thank you so much. I think if there's one thing that we can learn from Chief Albert Luthuli is that he was not a respecter of persons. He appreciated and he treated everyone with dignity. So thank you so much. It is both an honor and a privilege to deliver a vote of thanks to this profound, inspiring 7th Chief Albert Luthuli Founders Lecture. Tonight, we have gathered not only to reflect on the legacy of the Nobel Peace Laureate and a moral compass of our nation, but also to reaffirm our collective commitment to the values he so courageously embodied. To our distinguished speaker, Ambassador Mtintso, thank you so much for your powerful insights. Your eloquence on this year's Founders Lecture theme, Reclaiming African Languages, Identity, Knowledge, and Education Transformation. Thank you. Your words have stirred our minds and hearts, reminding us that the spirit of Chief Albert Luthuli lives on in the work we do and the values we uphold. The deliberations today reflect not only the importance of language, but our beholden individual and collective responsibility to ensure its preservation and promotion. And also, the importance of language in our aspiring motto as South Africans, unity in diversity. To our esteemed dignitaries and honored guests, your presence here tonight has elevated this event and reaffirmed the importance of remembering and honoring our foundational leaders. We are grateful for your continued support and leadership. To the Luthuli Museum and Unisa Chief Albert Luthuli Research Chair, this partnership is a shining example of what can be achieved when institutions come together in pursuit of legacy, scholarship, and national memory. Your collaboration ensures that Chief Albert Luthuli's legacy not only is preserved, but actively engaged by new generations of thinkers, activists, and citizens. To the media here today, thank you so much for covering this event and making sure that the impact is beyond the confines of this physical presence. To everyone who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, as I said, the organizers, the technical team, media, ushers, artists, the wonderful poems that we listened to, the volunteers, thank you for making this event seamless and memorable. And as we leave here tonight, may we carry forward the spirit of Chief Albert Luthuli with courage, compassion, and a deep commitment to justice. Thank you, and may this spirit and the legacy of Chief Albert Luthuli continue to speak in all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Advocate Naidu. Can you please remain on the podium, on the stage? Advocate Naidu, can you please join me? And Professor Mwepe and Professor Sekhalo, can you please join Advocate Naidu, please? The team wants to honor Ambassador Thenjiwe Mtintso. Okay. So the team is here to honor our Ambassador Thenjiwe Mtintso. It's an
Start with the respondents. Oh, start with the respondents. Oh, they're already coming. It's fine. Let's go on ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you will remember, tonight is a special night. And so if the band can assist us, please, as we celebrate.
To you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you again, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. How old are you now? Prof. Sekhalo, sebaka ke sa hao.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for us for Mam Thenjiwe to spend A special day with us, and we saw, as the university, as the Luthuli Museum, we wanted to take this moment to honor you for the sacrifices that you have made for this country and for many of us to be here today and to celebrate the ongoing journey of the freedom of this country. We acknowledge the work that you have done to make that possible. So all of us here would like to celebrate you, and we say happy birthday, Mama. Many more years. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy And now, ladies and gentlemen, don't worry, everybody's going to get a slice of cake. But as they're busy slicing the cake, we would also just like to honor Mam Thenjiwe with a small token, together with the respondents as well, to say thank you for making the time to be here with us tonight and sharing your wisdom with all of us. So please, let's just give them another round of applause.
Thank you so much. Now let's conclude. I would like to thank our guests and everyone gathering here tonight for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor being your program director tonight. I hope to see you soon. The dinner is prepared for you, ladies and gentlemen. Can the main table go first to dish up? Enjoy, and there's entertainment as well. There are live performances. Have a good evening.